Welcome to the Backgrounder Podcasts, where we dive deep into the stories, ideologies, and controversies shaping our world. This isn't just another news podcast. It's the context you need, the facts you crave, and the perspective you won't find anywhere else. Today, we're dissecting the Justice Democrats, the movement that's shaking up American politics from the inside out. We'll explore their origins, their bold progressive agenda, the controversies that follow them, and whether they're the future of the Democratic Party or a divisive force tearing it apart. Remember, Donald Trump's win has shown that the time is ripe for an inside-out revolution at the Democratic Party. So is this the time for Justice Democrats to step up to the plate? Well, we will leave that to you, the audience. Do comment below, as we are always looking to your feedback. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the Backgrounder Podcasts on your favorite platform. If you love deep dives and thought-provoking discussions, make sure to like, share, and leave a review to help others discover our content. Your support keeps us bringing you the stories that matter. Now, let's jump into today's episode.
All right, so are the Justice Democrats revolutionaries, or are they just another political faction, or maybe something in between?
Interesting question.
It is a big one, and we've got a ton of material to go through to figure that out.
We do. Articles, research, you name it.
We're going to try to really get to the bottom of what makes this group tick.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about the Justice Democrats is that they're a PAC, not a political party.
Right.
But they've really focused their energy on reshaping the Democratic Party from the inside out.
It's a long game they're playing.
It is.
To really understand the Justice Democrats, we kind of have to go back to their roots.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, their roots are really intertwined with the 2016 election.
You think back to January 2017.
Yeah.
The shockwaves of that election were still rippling.
Yeah.
And a lot of progressives were feeling disillusioned with the Democratic establishment.
Right.
They felt like the party had lost touch, had become too cozy with corporations and lobbyists.
It wasn't just like armchair critics, though, right? No.
This wasn't just people venting online.
Right. It was a really interesting mix of activists and then some seasoned political strategists.
Oh, okay.
So you had Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks. He brought his media savvy.
Right.
You had Kyle Kulinski, who added his online influence.
Okay.
And then Zach Exley, he was a former Bernie Sanders strategist.
Yeah.
He brought in all the campaign know-how.
So they had the messaging and they also had the strategy.
From the start.
Interesting.
And their message was very clear. They felt that the Democrats were failing working-class Americans.
Okay.
But how do you translate that frustration into action?
Right. So what did they set out to do?
So they didn't just want to tweak the system.
Right.
They wanted to overhaul it.
Wow.
Their agenda is ambitious,
I can imagine.
to say the least. Medicare for all,
Okay.
the Green New Deal,
Right.
abolishing private prisons, tuition-free college.
Wow, that's a pretty radical set of goals.
It is.
I mean, Medicare for all, that's a huge undertaking.
It is. That's not just about healthcare.
No.
It's like a challenge to how our whole healthcare system is structured.
You hit the nail on the head.
Really?
Yeah, for the Justice Democrats, this is about dismantling corporate influence in healthcare.
Ah.
They see the system as rigged against everyday people,
Okay.
where profits are prioritized over well-being.
Right.
So Medicare for all, in their view, is a step towards a more just and equitable system.
So then there's the Green New Deal. It feels like everyone's talking about it, but it's also really divisive.
It is.
What's the strategy there?
Yeah.
Is it really achievable?
The Green New Deal, it isn't just about environmental policy. It's about reimagining the American economy.
Right.
They want to tackle climate change while creating jobs, investing in communities that have been left behind.
Wow.
So it's a bold vision.
Yeah.
And whether it's feasible, that's definitely up for debate.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have this big, bold agenda. How do they actually go about making it happen?
Well, they've kind of taken a page from the classic David versus Goliath playbook. Instead of playing nice with the Democratic establishment, they decided to challenge it head on.
Oh, wow. So they're not afraid to go after the big names?
Not at
All
all.
the incumbents?
They decided to back progressive challengers in Democratic primaries,
Okay.
aiming to replace those establishment figures with candidates who align with their vision.
And they've had some success with that.
They have.
You're talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right?
Yeah.
That victory over Joe Crowley in 2018, that was a real turning point.
Absolutely. That race sent shockwaves through the political establishment.
Yeah.
Suddenly, everyone was paying attention to this group of upstarts who were taking on the status quo and winning.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not just about winning elections, right? It seems like her strategy is about building a movement.
Yeah.
Shifting the entire political landscape.
You're exactly right.
Okay.
And their model is deeply rooted in grassroots organizing and rejecting big money in politics.
Oh, interesting.
So they rely on small donations,
Okay.
volunteer networks,
Right.
a lot of social media savvy.
That whole power to the people idea.
Exactly.
Can they actually sustain that model in the long run? Especially in a system that seems designed to favor big money and established players.
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Can they keep up the momentum without compromising their core values?
Right.
It's a tough path.
It is.
But they've proven that they can mobilize voters in a way that traditional political machines haven't been able to.
That's true. And you can't talk about mobilizing voters without talking about the squad.
Yeah.
AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley.
Yep.
They've become the faces of this movement.
They're powerful voices in their own right.
Yeah.
Each of them has a compelling story,
Right.
a strong base of support. But they've also become lightning rods for criticism from both the right and even from within the Democratic Party.
Yeah, for sure. Remember when AOC danced on a rooftop?
Oh, yeah.
The media went crazy.
A wild news cycle.
The public was completely divided.
Everyone had an opinion.
So what does all this mean for the Democratic Party?
Right.
Have the Justice Democrats actually pulled the party to the left?
That's the question with no easy answer.
Yeah.
It's undeniable that they've injected progressive ideas into the mainstream political debate.
Okay.
Issues like climate change, healthcare, income inequality.
Right.
Those are now front and center in the Democratic platform.
But have they actually changed the party's direction?
Right?
Or are they just a vocal minority? Their critics argue that their tactics are counterproductive, that they're alienating moderates and making it harder for Democrats to win crucial elections.
It's complex.
Yeah.
There's a real tension there between energizing the base and building broad coalitions. The Justice Democrats need to figure out how to navigate that tension if they want to have a lasting impact.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another really crucial question.
It really does seem like they're walking this tightrope.
Yeah.
Pushing for this radical change, but trying to work within a system that's often resistant to that kind of change.
It's a delicate balance,
Yeah.
and it creates a lot of internal tension within the movement.
Oh, interesting.
There's this constant debate between pragmatism and purity.
Right. So do you compromise to get things done, or do you stick to your principles even if it means achieving less in the short term?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that has really haunted political movements throughout history.
For sure.
You know, the pragmatists would argue that you need to be willing to make deals,
Right.
to work within the system,
Right.
to celebrate even those incremental wins.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you risk achieving nothing at all.
But the purists would say that any compromise is a betrayal of the movement's core values, right? That it's a slippery slope toward becoming part of the very establishment you're trying to change.
Precisely. They would argue that the Justice Democrats' strength lies in their uncompromising stance, their willingness to call out injustice,
Yeah.
their refusal to play by the rules of a rigged game.
So how does that internal debate play out in their actual strategy?
Right.
How do they decide which battles to fight, which candidates to support?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
There's disagreement, right, over whether to focus on flipping Republican seats in swing districts,
Okay.
even if it means backing more moderate Democrats,
Right.
or, prioritizing those true progressives even in those safe blue districts.
So are they trying to build a progressive majority in Congress? Or are they more focused on creating a movement regardless of the immediate electoral consequences?
Yeah, it's a constant tug of war.
Hmm.
Some would say that winning power is the only way to enact meaningful change,
Right.
even if it means making compromises along the way. Others believe that maintaining that ideological purity is more important,
Yeah.
even if it means maybe a slower progress.
And then there's the question of how to deal with the Democratic establishment itself.
Right.
Do you try to work with them, or do you treat them as the enemy?
Yeah, that's another fault line within the movement.
Mm.
Some believe that the Democratic Party is fundamentally broken,
Sorry?
too beholden to corporate interests.
Right.
And that real change requires building a new party or radically transforming the existing one.
But wouldn't that be incredibly difficult?
Oh, yeah.
Starting a new party from scratch, especially in a system that's seemingly designed to protect the two-party system.
It would be a Herculean task, no doubt.
Yeah.
And that's why others within the Justice Democrats, they believe that working within the Democratic Party, pushing it from the left is a more realistic path to achieving those goals.
Right.
They point to the fact that they've already shifted the party platform on issues like climate change and healthcare.
So it sounds like there's a lot of internal debate.
Yeah.
A lot of different perspectives on how to best achieve their goals.
Yeah.
Is that a sign of weakness, or is it actually a strength?
I would argue it's a sign of a healthy movement.
Really?
Yeah, I think it means that they're having these tough conversations,
Okay.
challenging each other's assumptions, and they're constantly evolving their strategy.
It's like a living organism, right?
Exactly.
Constantly adapting to its environment.
And that adaptability will be crucial as they face the challenges ahead.
Yeah.
One of the biggest hurdles they'll have to overcome, I think, is building bridges with moderate Democrats.
Right.
Especially those representing swing districts.
Right, because those are the districts that often determine which party controls Congress.
Exactly.
But the Justice Democrats' aggressive tactics, like primarying incumbents, have sometimes backfired.
They have.
Right, it's led to the election of more conservative Republicans.
It's a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
They want to hold Democrats accountable, push for those progressive policies.
Yeah.
But they also need Democrats to win elections if they want to see those policies enacted.
It seems like they're constantly being pulled in two directions.
They are, and finding that sweet spot,
Yeah.
that balance between pushing for change and building those winning coalitions.
Right.
That will be key to their success in the long run.
And it's not just about electoral strategy, is it?
No.
They also have to navigate this complex and often controversial issue of race and identity politics.
That's right. The Justice Democrats have been very vocal champions for racial justice,
Okay.
for addressing systemic racism,
Yeah.
for amplifying the voices of marginalized communities.
Yeah.
And they've been incredibly effective at mobilizing young people of color who feel ignored by the traditional political system.
But they've also been accused of being too focused on identity politics,
Right.
of neglecting the concerns of white working-class voters.
Right.
How do they reconcile those competing demands?
It's a difficult challenge. But I think, the Justice Democrats, they see the fight for racial justice as inextricably linked to the fight for economic justice. They believe that you can't have one without the other.
So they're not trying to pit different groups against each other.
No.
They're arguing that these issues are interconnected, that everyone benefits from a more just and equitable society.
Precisely. And their ability to build a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition will be crucial to their long-term success.
Right.
It's not just about winning elections. It's about creating a movement that reflects the true diversity of America.
It's a bold vision, and they've certainly faced their share of criticism.
They have.
But they've also shown a remarkable ability to adapt, to learn from their mistakes, and to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in American politics.
Yeah, they've injected a new energy into the progressive movement.
For sure.
And they've forced the Democratic Party to confront some uncomfortable truth about its own priorities.
So what does the future hold for the Justice Democrats? Can they sustain this momentum? Can they overcome the challenges we've been discussing?
Well, I think they're facing a lot of headwinds.
Okay.
Keeping their base energized, fundraising in a system dominated by big money, getting their message out in a media landscape that's often hostile to their ideas.
Yeah.
These are all really formidable challenges.
It sounds like an uphill battle.
It is.
But they've proven that they can defy expectations.
Yeah.
That they're not afraid to take on the establishment.
Exactly. And their success will depend on their ability to balance their idealism with a healthy dose of pragmatism.
Okay.
To build bridges without compromising those core values.
Yeah.
And to keep adapting to a political landscape that's constantly shifting beneath their feet.
So they're at a crossroads.
They are.
The choices they make in the coming months and years will determine whether they become a powerful force for change or fade into the background of American politics. So we've been really unpacking the Justice Democrats,
We have.
their meteoric rise,
Yeah.
their impact on the Democratic Party,
For sure.
and this constant push and pull between their ideals and the realities of wielding political power.
It's a fascinating dynamic.
It is.
Yeah.
And as we kind of turn our attention to the future,
Right.
the million-dollar question is,
Yeah. What role will they play in 2024 and beyond.
What role will they play?
Right.
Will they continue to be this disruptive force?
Yeah.
Or will they adapt their approach and become more of a power player within the system?
It's a really interesting question.
I'm thinking back to that David versus Goliath analogy we talked about earlier.
Right.
At what point does David become Goliath? If the Justice Democrats gain more influence, will they be tempted to play the same games they once criticized?
That's the danger of any movement that gains power.
Right.
It's very easy to become what you initially set out to fight against.
Yeah.
The Justice Democrats will need to be very vigilant about maintaining those core values.
Right.
If they want to avoid falling into that trap.
And let's not forget, they were born out of a very specific moment.
They were.
The aftermath of the 2016 election.
Yeah.
A time of intense political upheaval and disillusionment with the status quo.
Yeah, and the political landscape has shifted considerably since then.
It has.
We've seen the rise of populism on both the left and the right.
Yeah.
A deepening of political polarization.
For sure.
And a growing distrust of institutions.
Right.
So how did the Justice Democrats navigate this new reality?
Right.
Do they double down on their confrontational approach, or do they adapt to become more palatable to a wider audience?
It's a tough choice.
It is.
If they become too pragmatic,
Yeah.
too willing to compromise,
Right.
they risk alienating their base,
They do.
the very people who fueled their rise to prominence.
Right, but if they cling too tightly to those ideals,
Yeah.
they risk becoming irrelevant,
Right.
a fringe group shouting from the sidelines while the real decisions are being made elsewhere.
So what's the answer? What's the path forward for the Justice Democrats?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think their success will depend on a few key factors.
Okay.
First, they need to find a way to sustain the energy and enthusiasm of their base.
Right.
That means giving their supporters concrete ways to make a difference, to see that their actions are having a real impact.
It's not enough to just get people riled up.
No.
You have to give them a sense of agency, a belief that they can actually change things.
Exactly.
Right.
Second, they need to broaden their appeal to build bridges with moderate Democrats,
Right.
and even with some Republicans on specific issues.
So finding common ground on issues like climate change or criminal justice reform,
Yeah.
even if they disagree on other issues.
Right. They need to show that they're not just ideologues, that they're willing to work with anyone who shares their goals,
Right.
even if they don't agree on every single detail.
But that can be tricky.
It can.
How do you compromise without sacrificing your core values?
It requires a delicate touch,
Yeah.
a willingness to listen, and a focus on building relationships. And it's not just about working with other politicians. It's about engaging with communities, building those grassroots coalitions, and showing that they're fighting for everyday people,
Okay.
not just for their own political agenda.
And let's not forget the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
The Justice Democrats have been incredibly effective at crafting narratives that resonate with voters,
They have.
especially young people who are disillusioned with the political system.
Yeah, they've tapped into a deep vein of frustration and anger,
Yeah.
and they've channeled that energy into a movement for change.
Right.
But they need to keep refining that message
Right.
to adapt it to the changing political landscape and to make sure it continues to resonate with a broad audience.
So it sounds like the Justice Democrats are facing a crossroads.
They are.
They can continue to be a disruptive force, challenging the status quo and pushing for radical change.
Right.
Or they can evolve, become
Yeah.
more pragmatic, and work within the system to achieve their goals.
The path they choose will have a profound impact, not just on their own future, but on the future of the Democratic Party,
Yeah.
and perhaps even on the future of American politics as a whole.
It's a fascinating story.
It is.
And it's far from over.
Right.
We'll be watching closely to see how it unfolds.
Wheel.
And in the meantime, we encourage you to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep engaging in the political process.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the future of our democracy depends on all of us.
Well said.
Yeah,
And remember, even small actions can have a big impact.
that's true.
So find your voice, find your cause, and get involved.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, stay curious.